Right, we're all set up for you. Got your presentation. Now, ready for good fine. Everyone just stands. I'll do the introduction now. Then I'll introduce you. And then basically,
Okay, good morning everybody. Good morning and welcome to our Hamburg Smart Transformation event. I'm just waiting for the last couple of people to come in and take a seat. It's almost a shame to be indoors when it's one of the warmest days so far in Hamburg, I was told. 20 degrees out there.
Probably one of the warmest of the whole year.
Is it going to be the warmest of the whole year? Yeah. Does he want to come back for SMM? I bet you it's going to rain on me in SMM.
Actually, it wasn't good for last year's dream.
Well, last time I was here it was very cold. So it's but anyway, welcome to the Smart Transformation event. I've got a very busy day for you today, and my objective is to try and give you all something to go back to your offices with and think that you've got something out of this day, some learning, some key part of the agenda that's going to help you in this digital transformation that everybody's talking about, so we can understand a little bit more about maybe in your different roles, you can understand what it is that you're going to have to look for as you look at your roles, you look at the function, you look at the changing aspects of the industry. So just before we start, I'm sure you know how to make an exit if the fire alarm goes off, which is straight out that door. There are toilets here, they're just to the right, and lunch is going to be served where the coffee was served. So we are effectively in these two rooms all day up until 4 o'clock, and then at 4 o'clock we're going to go up to the bar. We have to go outside and through the main entrance to the hotel, but we're going up to the bar for a few drinks directly after that. You may have seen in the messages that we've sent you that we had a few hiccups on the way here. Well, we didn't have a hiccup ourselves. Our baggage had a hiccup, so we are missing a few key elements such as signage and proper name badges, etc. But that shouldn't interfere with us giving you a full day of discussion. I want to thank the Isle of Man, who are the main sponsors for this event, because it's without them you would have to pay. So you've got effectively a free day here, thanks to the Isle of Man. Okay, it's a day at the office, but I'm sure you don't mind that really as well, especially so we're going to give you a free drink at the end of it. So I want to thank the Isle of Man. We are streaming this event, so anybody else, we're sending out messages so that people can actually see what's going on. And part of that is going to be that there's going to be a lot of interactivity. I want as much interactive engagements with you as we're going to have with the speakers and the panellists. We've got 4 sessions during the course of the day. Each one has got a couple of key speakers, each one has a panel session. But what we're going to do is to use something called Slido. And if we could go to the next slide. We're going to use Slido. And for that, I need you to take your mobile phones out, please. I need you to go to Slido. So if you go and find the 24 Hours Loves You, you will find that you can connect to the internet there rather than use your own data charges. And then go to slido.com or use the Google Apps to find the Slido app. So I want everybody just to spend 2 minutes just doing that if you can, so that we're going to be using Slido all the time. I've got questions throughout this event that I want to ask you during the course of the day. And it's also an opportunity for you to ask questions of the panellists and us at the front here. So it really is interactive. I get your thoughts on particular topics and questions. You get to offer your thoughts and questions. You can still put up your hand, there's a microphone there. But some people like to ask anonymous questions, just to fire up things a little bit. So you can use Slido to ask anonymous questions of the panelists. So, have you all managed to get onto Slido? Does anybody need a couple more minutes just to do that? This is the technology age we're in. We don't tell you to turn your phones off anymore when you walk into a conference room. We invite you to leave it on. But do put them on silent, please.
Seems like it's fighting to get on.
Still getting on.
No.
I think the Wi-Fi might be on.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Going down with everybody.
Yeah, everybody on.
24 hours loves you. Right.
Yeah.
Well, if you've got free roaming, use that. That'll do this trick as well. But if you go into slido.com and then it asks you for a code and you put in SmartHam18, you should find yourself on a participant page. And in a minute, we'll be able to put up some questions. So, we go over to the Slido slide, please. So now if you're on, you should see that question pop up on your telephones. How many cups of coffee have you had today? And as people answer, we get to see. The top right-hand side tells you how many people have answered. We'll be asking some more serious questions shortly, but this is just a way for you to get a little bit more used to using Slido and seeing the poll questions. There's another part of the Slido screen that you've got on your phones, or you can use your tablets as well, or your computers, and there you can ask questions. So you can use that to ask questions, which I can then put to the speakers if you want, if you don't want to raise your hand. If you want to be a little bit confrontational without saying who you are. Some people like doing that. So good, so I've got 24 of you. How many in the room? 5. A few more. Anybody still trying to get onto Slido?
I'm trying to get on to the
Have you got on?
There.
So you're not there, you're in a dead zone.
That would have to be hands up then.
We'll try and resolve that a little bit later. So we'll come back to Slido and any questions. If you've got questions anyway, you can still use the microphone, as I said. But it's good to see that 14% had far too many coffees. I could have added myself to that list already. So I'm going to now invite Christoph Schwaner from the German Ship Owners Association to come and offer an overview of what we're going to be talking about during the course of the day. I invited VDR to come and give a sort of parachute view, bird's eye view of some of the key industries. So you get to use that.
Thank you.
And if you press the slide, it should go straight to your first slide.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig, and ladies and gentlemen. The program says I'm the forum scene setter here, and to be honest, what I cannot do is tell you how to improve ship operations and making it more smart and digital. We have lots of interesting panelists today and discussions, so what I will do in the next 15 minutes or so, I will touch upon some major challenges of the digitization in shipping, and maybe they will give room for discussions and raise some thoughts. And just as a footnote, I used the Pantone color spring version for this presentation, as spring has sprung in Hamburg these days, so a bit more lively colors. The first thesis I would like to discuss is disrupting merchant shipping is not that easy. I mean, of course, disruption is one of the major buzzwords in the industry right now, all over the world. Kodak was disrupted by digital cameras, music labels were disrupted by music streaming in the iPod, department stores were disrupted by Amazon. So shipping, yeah, of course, will be disrupted, period. Really, is it the case? I mean, it's so much easier to set up a platform where you can rent your apartment to tourists than to digitize a container trade from one part of the world to another, where so many different parties are involved. So I'm not saying disruption is not happening to our industry, but I would say one needs to put much more effort, time and money to make it happen. It won't happen overnight. And, but of course we are seeing lots of digital platforms, for example, emerging for container transport. But behind these platforms there's still a lot of analog work done by lots of people. And this will change, but it takes some time. And one of the main drivers for this change is my second thesis: ship operations will become much more transparent. If you're looking for an adequate term to describe the shipping industry, transparent might not be the word that comes to your mind first. But for example, for financial investors, they demand a much higher degree of transparency than shipping companies were used to in the past. And with digital tools, much more data is available today for the customers. And they would, for example, like to know, where is my container now? When does it arrive at the next port? And they ask, why is this container standing for 2 days in the terminal before the truck fetched it? So more information is available, causing troubles and questions. And of course, carriers want to know more about the performance of the vessels they chartered from ship owners. And transparency will also boost efficiency inside the companies. The staff ashore can actually monitor and see what's going on at the vessel, the speed, consumption rate, etc. So more and more shipping companies are setting up the so-called fleet operations or fleet support centers. We'll talk about that later today, where lots of data of every vessel in the fleet is collected and analyzed. And this big stream of data is leading to the next thesis: maritime connectivity is key to smart operations. Connectivity between vessels and shore operations is getting more affordable and faster. But at the same time, I think we all know that from our private use of the internet, the amount of data is increasing as well. So lots of sensors, communications, crew welfare, and especially remote vessels, someone in the future, they will all need real-time, constant stream of data. And especially when a vessel is approaching a port, it is necessary to transfer much more data than during the journey. And this is some point where we as an industry association try to step in. VDR is urging public authorities here in Germany to enhance the mobile connectivity in coastal waters and in ports, and also on sea waterways like the River Elbe. Compared to our neighboring states like the Netherlands, for example, where you can sail a vessel close to the coast and you have a constant mobile connection, in German coastal waters this is not always the case. And even on the River Elbe it's a problem sometimes to have an internet connection at all. So the same applies to the coastal areas, and we have so many offshore wind farms in the North and the Baltic Sea. It would be quite easy to set up a dense mobile network covering the main shipping routes, and this is something we are working on. And the Port of Hamburg, for example, I think is a good example. They want to be the first mover for the 5G technology. So something is happening, and I think this is very important for smart operation, that we have a good connectivity. Well, talking about the data that is sent, it's not only sent between companies and different parties involved in the supply chain. Data is also exchanged with public authorities. And that's why public authorities, administration, need to keep up with the private sector. So let me give you just two examples. The first is the national single window. I think many of you will know about that. So ship owners, shipping companies, agents, masters, they all have to report a call of a European port electronically to the authorities. And rather than reporting to lots of different bodies, the idea is that everyone is just communicating with one single window. But unfortunately, it was up to every member state in the European Union to make this reality, and in Germany it's up to the federal state level, which make it even more diverse and complicated. So in general it's a wonderful idea, but in practice very complicated. Port visits have to be announced in some different stages in advance. You have to make an arrival notification, departure notification, waste notification, security notification, so many things. So in theory, this could all be done automatically. Data could be sent automatically to the national single window, but in practice it is people using Excel sheets. So there's a master or an officer on the bridge compiling lots of Excel sheets for every port of call. I wouldn't call that very efficient and smart, to be honest. And the second example is flag state administration. I won't mention individual flag states here, which are quite good, accepting digital documents. All I'm saying is there are some flag states nearby that still have a way to go. And today every child can use a smartphone. It's very easy to use computer programs today. They are user-friendly, they're very easy to understand. You don't have to read any manuals anymore. But what we like to have is that you also have a public authority and government bodies that have a customer-friendly service which is not very complicated anymore. So, like, for example, that digital and automated reports, or also logbooks, digital logbooks, could reduce administrative tasks on board and disburden the crew. And this leads me to the next thesis. Digitalization makes seafarers' jobs more satisfactory. In many industries, employees fear digitalization. They fear that their jobs will be destroyed. And it's true. I mean, automation, smart factories, of course, they will erase entire professions, and also white-collar jobs will be affected. But unless every vessel is sailing autonomously, which is very unlikely for a lot of reasons, we will still need high-qualified seafarers. But when technology reduces the administrative burdens from seafarers, and when intelligent soft and hardware increases safety, for example, infrared cameras or anti-collision software, then seafarers will have much more time for their original jobs, and shipping will be even more safe than today. We as VR, for example, are part of an international working group that is assessing the future skills of seafarers, and we are adapting training schedules accordingly. But isn't it a bright perspective for a seafarer to work in a fleet operations center, or maybe in future in a fleet control center for remote vessels, and go home to spend time with the family every evening? I think this is a promising future. So more and more of this technology is being introduced, and of course, the more connected we are, the more digital we are, that opens the door for cyber threats. And this is my next thesis. Human sloppiness is the greatest threat to is the greatest cyber threat. So, Craig mentioned that I'm a director of communications at the BDR, so journalists very often ask me if a ship can be hacked and remotely controlled very easily by hackers, by using GPS spoofing, for example, and leading the ship on the wrong course. Well, we just had an interesting workshop on that at the BDR last week. I'm asking you, when you drive with your car on a German highway and the navigation system tells you that you are 200 meters off the highway in a cornfield, do you panic? Do you believe what this system is saying, or do you just look out of the window and say, no, I'm still on the highway, everything is fine? I mean, this is a bit the same on a vessel. Crews do not only operate by ACTIS, and ACTIS is not only fed by GPS data. So there's also a radar overlay. And if it's not too rainy or too dark outside, you can also watch out of the window and you can see where actually you are. So it is very, very difficult to manipulate a ship efficiently that you can navigate it and the crew would not recognize. It's not entirely impossible, but it takes time, money and effort. So why should a hacker do that? I mean, eventually there's always a link, a direct link, a physical link from the bridge to the engine that you can always control where the ship is going manually. And as long as crews are well trained and seafarers have a good training and know how to navigate without ACTIS, safe navigation might not be our greatest issue, talking about cybersecurity. I think the greatest threat, however, is what I called a bit rude the human sloppiness. It's inserting private USB sticks in bridge or engine controls. It's recharging your mobile phones via a USB plug somewhere on the bridge. It's opening dangerous email attachments, installing software without asking for permission, using open Wi-Fi networks. Those are similar threats that appear onshore and in every industry. Hackers will not try to sabotage ship navigation. They will try to gather sensitive data, market-relevant data. They will try to manipulate data, use CEO fraud, or simply encrypt data and ask for ransom fees. So we need to raise awareness for potential threats and train employees both on board and ashore. And this leads me to the next thesis. Digital transformation requires lifelong learning. Of course, the pace of innovation is increasing, and lifelong learning of employees and management alike should be part of shipping companies' strategy, because people need to understand what's going on, technology-wise, but also business model-wise. However, not every company has the same resources, especially the small and medium-sized companies, and we have lots of these companies in Germany, they are struggling with the current market and financial situation. So that's one of the reasons why VDR offers lots of different seminars and workshops on digital platforms, cybersecurity like last week, the GDPR, connectivity, blockchain, and so many other things. One of our future workshops at the VDR is additive manufacturing or 3D printing. This is my next thesis. 3D printing will improve spare part logistics. Additive manufacturing is expected to play a predominant role in spare part logistics in the future. Today, we know that when a system component breaks in the engine room and the spare part is needed, then either the crew will mill it in the workshop on board, or in most cases for more complicated stuff, they have to order it. And that can take days or weeks and costs lots of money. So in the future, the supplier of a spare part might just send a 3D model to the next port where we have a 3D printer, and this printer will just print the part and it can be put in the machine quite fast and cost effective. And I think it's promising that in more and more shipping hubs in the world, 3D printers are being installed, for example in Rotterdam or in Singapore. Printing whole vessels is not an issue of today. However, in 2016, the Southern Korean government invested $20 million in a program to research the possibilities of 3D printing whole ships and offshore equipment. So we might see something happening there in the future. But there's also a negative side, and I will just amend this thesis, because 3D printing will also, or might reduce seaborne trade. I looked into a lot of research lately about this, and the bandwidth of assumptions is very broad, so ranging from marginal impact to 40% less global trade. This is from the ING Bank. Interesting study. So today it's impossible to predict the potential impact of 3D printing on the global trade and the supply chains, because we lack much of data, and it's not clear how the technology will develop. But nonetheless, studies and data available show that 3D printing is here to stay and will undoubtedly affect supply chains in a more or less important way. So I'm just saying, who would have anticipated what the smartphone would do to business models 10 years ago, or the internet 15 or 20 years ago? So maybe 3D printing in 10, 15, 20 years' time will have a huge impact. And when global supply chains will alter or even vanish away, then container ships might be the first segment that is affected by this trend. So as soon as 3D printing is able to enter mass production to a rather competitive cost, I think it's high time for merchant shipping to act. And that requires not only careful monitoring of technology, but it also requires strategic decisions. And taking strategic decisions is leading me to the next thesis. Digital strategy has become a management priority. Compared to 3 or 4 years ago, the importance of digitalization for top management in shipping was not that strong as today. Nowadays, more and more companies have chief digital officers, chief transformation officers. I've seen some in the audience today already. So someone is taking care of digital innovation on a top management level. And often those managers come from outside the industry with new ideas and new insights. And here we have the same problem for the small and medium-sized companies, that they do not always have the resources available to attract these kind of talent. However, and this is very promising, many of our small and medium-sized companies are family-owned, and in these family companies we see a trend that the next generation, the sons and daughters of the owners, they are, well, 30, 40 years old, and they are really ready to boost digital innovations in their parents' companies. And I would like to conclude with my last thesis, which is more an appeal to all of us. Let's embrace and shape digital transformation. I often hear from startups in Germany that the German shipping companies are less open for innovation compared to especially Scandinavia or Southeast Asia. I would say it's not entirely true. I know from a lot of German companies that they invest much effort into digital innovation and also in collaboration with startups, but they just don't talk so much about it like maybe others do. But anyway, we at VDR would like to support innovative ideas, and therefore we organize a pitching event. So please allow me just a very small advertisement here. It's Pitch Blue. It's an event on 24th of May where we will invite startups and we have a jury of dedicated shipping experts, CEOs and managers, and they will judge the ideas and give awards to the best promising startups. So if you would like to know more about that, pitchblue.hamburg is the website. Okay, so let me just finish with this guy over there. I think you recognize him, Napoleon. It is said about Napoleon that he turned down the British engineer Robert Fulton after this guy presented plans for the world's very first steamship to Napoleon. And Napoleon is reported to have said that, what leads you to the assumption that a ship would sail against the wind and against the current if one only were to light a fire below deck? I don't have time to listen to such nonsense. We all know, within a few decades, steamships replaced the conventional sailing vessels, and they were much faster, safer, and more efficient than sailing vessels. I think today maritime shipping is in a comparable situation, and after all, digitalization will also change transport and our business models of the companies, and maybe a great deal faster than the steamship did. So we should be open to innovation and new technologies. And when I look at today's agenda, I'm pretty confident that we won't hear any Napoleon speech today. And I'm looking forward to the following presentations and discussions. And we, of course, will dive a lot deeper in the issues than I did in the presentation here. I thank you very much for listening to me, and let's enjoy the conference. Thank you.
If I may, you mentioned about sort of 5G at sea, the idea of putting on the wind turbines at sea. How far advanced are those discussions to create a kind of maritime 5G network, and how far could it go?
It's called a roundtable, and there are lots of roundtables, but one new roundtable that was set up before the new government came into place. Is bringing together industry, but also the government, the federal government, and coastal states. And with the new administration, we also would like to keep up this work, because it is not likely that private investors, like telecom or other companies, will set up these stations on the high seas, because it's not they also don't do that in the rural areas of Germany. So there must be some kind of public support, public funding, but maybe also we will have the bidding for the new 5G licensees. So it is also possible to set up some frameworks. When a company bids for a license, they have to fulfill some requirements. And one, for example, could be to invest in offshore mobile connectivity. One thing is the coastal areas, one thing is the rivers. I mean, I know from pilots and also from seafarers that even on the rivers Elbe, here in Hamburg, when there's good weather, like yesterday or today, there are lots of tourists on the river, they're sending pictures on WhatsApp, Instagram, whatever. and the bandwidth is not enough for ships to transfer data. So, I mean, it sounds simple, but we need more investment here. And I think that with the new government in place, fortunately we have a new government here, we can work about that.
You also see a way that there needs to be more of a focus on the standards when it comes to connectivity. I've been talking to a number of organisations or projects that are looking at maritime connectivity platforms, either for ports or for projects that are more about connecting ships to actually exchange information. Does there need to be more work on that front to create a standard platform, communication platform?
I'm maybe not the right expert for that. I would assume it's quite difficult to establish one platform, since we have different players, we have different technologies. What I think is important that ship owners will have the possibility to choose from different technologies. Like one thing is satellite communications, which is of course much more reliable and cheaper than in the past. But when you're close to a coastal area, you should also be able to switch to mobile connectivity, which is, of course, it's a bit cheaper. So when you're close to a port or to a coast, and many of the journeys, of course, all of them end in a port, so you approach the coast at some time. So you just need some different antennas, but I think it's unlikely to see one platform that's doing everything, but it's up to us to start that.
Anybody else got any questions before I ask you questions? Nobody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, come in, take a seat. You've already grabbed the coffee, it's perfect. Now, just to remind you that we've got Slido, so I'm going to start now getting you to use Slido for proper before we go into the first session. So if you go into Slido now, you will see a new set of questions appear shortly. So I'll put the big first one up there now. So if we could switch to Slido, please. And so, one of the biggest challenges you are facing in your role today, I want you all to just quickly type in, what's the biggest challenge that you've got? I'm trying to ascertain here, trying to see what sort of things you'd like to learn from today to actually take away, so we can see where we need to focus some of the discussion. So, what are the biggest challenges you are facing in your role today? I may leave these questions up as we go into the first sessions, so you can continue to answer them anyway. And I'm going to put up other questions as well that you'll see during the course of the morning. So I'd like you to start answering that one. And then also, how big a difference will digitalisation of the shipping industry be? And I want you to look at those questions as well. Whether you think the digitalisation is going to be significant, insignificant, somewhat, or extreme. And what are your pain points that you'd like to see the digital solution address? It might be that you've got a pain point that you've identified and you're really looking for some kind of digital solution to come out of a startup or some innovative company or somebody within your own business as well. And what is the most significant development in the transformation of the maritime and shipping sector you've seen over the last year? So a quick backwards glance here. What happened in the last year that you thought was a real talisman of the changes that we're seeing? And the last question that I'm looking to ask you in this session is, which part of the maritime and shipping industries will or needs to be transformed by digital solutions? Whether it's ship management, vessel charter or brokering, shipbuilding, training and education, or business-to-business relationships. And potentially there I've put in the idea that blockchain may be a tool there. But we'll come back to blockchain later in the day. Okay, so those questions I'm going to keep up there. during the course of this first session. So now if we could go over to the main slides, please. So we'll come back to those a little bit later. So we go to the main. So now we're going to the first session of the day, and we're going to look at the idea of thinking smart, acting smart, and what we mean by this unprecedented age of transformation. We have a couple of speakers for you, and then we're going to have a panel session during the end of that. So as we go through these speakers, as you hear these presentations, as we have the discussion at the end of it, I'd like you to continue to look at those poll questions that I've asked of you. And don't forget as well, as we go through this, you can put your own questions into Slido. So when we have the panel session, I can ask the panellists your questions as well. I'll offer you the chance as well to put your hand up and take part in the discussion, but there will be those opportunities there. So my great pleasure is, of course, now to invite our first speaker to come up, Mark O'Neill from Columbia Marlow, President of Columbia Ship Management Marlow Navigation in Cyprus, with an office here, so he's travelling backwards and forwards between the warm place. This will slide. Thank you. Thank you.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to Craig, thanks to all of you for turning up. This is a subject very close to my heart. We realised very soon after just before, and we managed at an early stage to partner up with Lufthansa Shipping, and so we partnered up with them to bring aviation digitalisation into shipping, and of course they helped us and advised us on this process, which is something I'm going to touch upon again in a minute. It's a very long, a very expensive and a very difficult path to go down, this whole digitalisation process, and people mustn't assume that it has a beginning and a natural end. It's an ongoing process that I always describe it as a path. You have to get onto it, and then you have to stay onto it for the duration, and hopefully it will deliver the results at the end of the day. It's definitely the right thing to do, and indeed I've often described it as existential. If we aren't digitalised in the next 5 years as a medium to large company, then we go out of business, simple as that. I think smaller companies, perhaps if they operate in niche businesses, get away with less digitalisation, but the medium to large companies must digitalise. So very quickly, I think I've got 10 or 15 minutes this morning. I just want to talk about what is digitalisation as we see it, having gone quite far down this process. How does one digitalise? A lot of companies, a lot of the smaller companies out there sit there and go, okay, I've heard a lot about this, but where do I actually get started? And why does one need to digitalise? All fairly obvious questions, one would think. What is digitalisation? I get fed up with attending seminars and conferences, and everybody just talks about the latest software and hardware, the latest software to get paperless office. That's digitalisation. You know, we can send lots of big data from one office to the other, from the vessel to the office. To me, that's a complete distraction. Digitalisation is much more than that. It's much more than software, applications, hardware. It's technology. Of course it's technology. It is data, big data, but it's also innovation and it's processes. It's the interaction of all three of those. Technology, the hardware and the software, is just one aspect of the whole digital process. You can't digitalise rubbish. You have to first look at what you do. You have to try and do things better. And then you achieve what's called process excellence, and then you go through this transformational change and digitalise. It's a means to a greater end, not an end in itself. I hear time and time again, if you digitalise, you're going to be successful, we have to digitalise. The first speaker there talked about the importance of digitalisation. It is part of the answer, but it's not a panacea for all ills. And it's only one element of this transformational change which we have to go through. So digitalisation is a tool in our toolbox, but it's not the one and only tool. We really have to think much wider than that, and we have to, much more important is to look at what we do, how we do it, how we can improve doing it, and then how we can use digitalisation to do it better. It is existential. We will all be digitalised in under 5 years' time, our processes, but it's a question of degree. I attended the Transas conference in Vancouver about three weeks ago, and I think I upset them a little bit by saying that the push was, look, you've got to digitalise your business, you've got to digitalise everything that doesn't move, digitalise it quick, spend huge amounts of money. I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. You can waste huge time and huge effort and huge amounts of money on this process if there isn't focus. All of us have to look at what our clients need and what our market expects and demands to remain competitive. So you don't need to digitalise everything. You don't need to spend huge amounts of money. When we embarked on this process, we looked at one of the biggest providers of software in the market, and the bill they presented to us to go through this whole digitalisation process was eye-watering. It would have put us out of business. There's no way in a million years we could have paid the sum that was asked for us for a 5-year program, which is why the partnership with Lufthansa Industry Solutions was so fantastic, because they said, no, you don't need all of this. Let's start right at the beginning to look at what we actually want to achieve here, what the market expects from a management company, and do it in a sensible way. So yes, it's existential, but focus on what you really need. And some of your businesses may not require that much digitalisation at all. How does one achieve digitalisation? First and foremost, like so many things in life, we think we can do it all ourselves, but we can't. Seek professional help. You need to get on board the professionals to look at your business and take you through the process. Again, as I said, we were very lucky with Lufthansa. It's a path, not a process. If you embark on this whole expedition, adventure, thinking it has a beginning and an end, then you're absolutely wrong. It certainly has a beginning, and you have to get on it. Don't think that you're going to wait for... I sometimes read this in the papers, you know, it's always sometimes better coming second and coming to the party late and then just adopting. That doesn't work in this environment. You have to get started, but once you're started, that's a fantastic achievement, and you're on that path, and you can develop as you go along. The mistake is to think that let others do the running, and then there'll be something which you can just buy off the shelf, and we'll be digitalised, and we'll have caught up. We may have to spend a little bit more extra money. That's wrong. It's such a tailored process to your business that you have to get started, and you need professional help for that. The greatest barrier, certainly that I've experienced, and this is coming from an extremely ignorant person on the IT side. I mean, before I did this job, I was a lawyer that could barely turn on his BlackBerry and was probably the IT department's biggest enemy number one. The greatest barrier is ignorance and lack of internal buy-in. Everybody has an idea about IT. Everyone has an idea about applications. And unfortunately, most of the decision makers are from a different age. They have no idea of how important digitalisation is to the business going forward. And it's not a cynical resistance. It's not a sort of a nasty, resentful resistance. It's just lack of understanding. It's ignorance in its truest form. So that's the biggest barrier, and why most companies you'll see, I assumed as CEO, I assumed responsibility for the whole digitalisation, optimisation process right from day one. You'll have seen recently in Tradewind, I think we have a Damco representative here now, but Maersk have also, Soren Skue has accepted responsibility for digitalisation. It must reside at the top just to push this thing through, because it has to, and you require this buy-in. Sometimes you have to drive it through. What is the process? And you have to go through this. The first is setting your digital vision. This is a long process. This took us 6 months. From the time of from the merger announcement, we embarked on this exercise to actually think about what we wanted to achieve. What is it? What is our? How do we want this thing to look? let's look at our processes and achieve process excellence, and then try and see how can we digitalize those processes so that we're creating that the end product actually reflects what we thought at the beginning. Then you go on to your digital agenda, which is how we're going to get there. What's the process? How long? What's the start point and I'm about to say end point, but that would be going against what I said. But what is the process going through? Then you go through the ideation and creation. So you're looking at the requirement of the business and how you put that together, and then you go through implementation. And then, sorry to say, you start right at the beginning again, because there is no end. It is a path. By the time you get to the end, you'll be a continuing process of how do we improve, and how do we use the whole digitalization, innovation, technology and processes to get us there. Very, very important before you digitalize that you achieve process excellence and this whole transformational process, business transformation. There is no point in digitalizing rubbish. You will expend huge amounts of money only to have to start the whole thing again. So sit down, focus, and think, how can we do what we do much, much better, much, much more cost effectively? That innovation and processes, I would say, is just as important, if not more important, than the digitalization process that you will then go through. So really important to look at what you do and how you do it and how you can do it better. Apologies for the typo at the top. Why does one digitalize? It should be. I'm actually sick and tired of the word digitalisation. I think it's a complete red herring. It's, if we think of digitalisation like asking us 40 years ago, do you think computers are going to be necessary in our day-to-day business? Everyone would go, well, it's a no-brainer. Of course they're going to be important. Same with digitalisation. Of course digitalisation is vitally, existentially important to our businesses. But what it is just a means to an end. The end is optimisation. It's us doing things better, to remain, to achieve the efficacies, efficiencies, economies of scale that one can achieve through optimization, and thereby remaining relevant and compelling in our marketplace and competitive. So it's just a toolbox to optimization. It's nothing more. Let's not think we've got to go out here and digitalize, and once we digitalize, we'll be okay. But we won't. We have to look at optimization. How do we do things better? One of the biggest classification societies told me recently when I met them, looking at the whole concept of optimization, that operators within the shipping industry will need to achieve OPEX savings of about 30% in the next 5 years to remain relevant and competitive. And that's a hugely challenging task when you look at how competitive shipping already is. But I totally agree with them. What do we mean by optimization? We mean performance optimization, looking at where you do things, footprint optimization, where you actually do things around the world, cost optimization, how we can reduce cost, process optimization, how we can do things that we do more efficiently. Technical optimization, as far as a manager is concerned, looking at how we technically manage our vessels on board and ashore better. Crew optimization, how we look after our crew's training needs, how we look after their welfare, how we look after their rotation and information about their next employment. And commercial optimization, how our clients, the ship owners, make their vessels more attractive to the charterers out there. Can charterers insert some sort of commercial parameters and requirements into the whole process and achieve it much more efficiently. We at Columbia Marlowe have now embarked, and in fact I was just talking to Tradewinds about it yesterday, on a performance optimization control room, because I totally believe that digitalization is a red herring. And this is all about optimization. As I said, it's just a tool in our toolbox of optimization. And what we're trying to do here is achieve all of those optimizations in a control room in various parts of the world that we have offices. And that will be up and running from September, together with a number of key partners of ours. So performance optimization, in my mind, is where digitalization takes us. All, of course, with a digital agenda as a background. You need to establish your digital vision, you need to establish your digital agenda, you need to embark on that path, but with a view to optimize. It has to have a goal at the end of the day. Don't just digitalize for the sake of digitalizing and expect you to be there, wherever there is, and able to compete in the marketplace. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Mark. We do have questions, but they'll come at the end in the panel session. So to give ourselves the maximum time on the panel session, I'm going to invite Luther Kretschmann from Fraunhofer CML to come up and join in, offer his thoughts. There's the remote control. If we could go over to his slide. So we'll just move the slide on when it comes up. We'll just move forward, and there's Lutz, and there you are.
Good morning, everyone.
Just a reminder also, sorry Lutz, just a reminder just to keep on looking at there's questions coming in already which I'll use during the panel session, so put your questions in, but also continue to answer those poll questions that I've given you. Thanks. Lutz.
Again, I hope everybody can hear me. Good morning, my name is Lutz Kretschmann, and I was invited here today to share some insights, thoughts on this whole issue of digital transformation, as I will call it in my presentation, sort of from a scientist's perspective. And I think that this whole process has been gaining speed over the last couple of years, as we've all sort of noticed. However, we will not see the full scope of changes for another few years. So we will only understand what actually works, what doesn't, in a couple of years. But as Mark just said, I think that now is the time to set a course, to start working in this area. And I will start with a very brief introduction of my background, so you get a chance to understand the insights from what background they come from. I work for Fraunhofer, a very large organization with more than 25,000 employees, and our research group here in Hamburg is a little bit smaller. We focus on maritime logistics, and we do that in three fields, which are sort of port and terminal development, ship management, and sea traffic and nautical solutions. And in these fields, we sort of develop the digital toolbox, or digital tools a lot of times, which is sort of advanced analytics, machine learning, and also the commercial side, where with our partners we work on sort of digital business models. Besides that, we also publish various studies regularly. A couple you see here. Oops. I just want to go into the latest one, which you see here, because I will make reference to it a couple of times. It's sort of will be published this spring, and we've done it in cooperation with the VDMA, Marine Equipment and Systems, also here from Hamburg. And this sort of focuses on the digital transformation in the marine equipment and systems industry. But I believe that, well, a lot of the results are also relevant for the whole industry, the whole maritime industry in general. And, well, that said, well, as a background, from my understanding, the digital transformation is currently still in a very early phase, if you look at the whole industry. We do see, though, that companies have begun to recognize how far the impacts will impact their business models, their competition. And here's sort of the oh, that's not the way it's supposed to look. I'm sorry for that. It's sort of supposed to look different. And the figure. To back up this sort of statement that this is still or that companies have recognized the impact. Here you see a figure from the previously mentioned studies where 2/3 of the companies see high or very high developments when it comes to their competitiveness due to the digital transformation. And besides this industry or this company focused developments, we also see industry-wide developments. And there is three which I brought here today, three developments that stand out from my perspective and sort of to shape the couple of years and also maybe give some food for thought for the discussions today. The first one, now I have to look, is about value creation. We see or we believe that with this digital transformation, there will be a shift towards sort of new intangible digitalized goods in the industry. So current products are, well, in the threat of reduced margins in the future, such old products, current products and services. The second development that we see is new entrants. This already has started. There's some new entrants in the industry, and we believe that this will continue and it will lead to more intense competition and also a decrease in profitability for the current market players. And the third one that we expect is changing value chains. And we've already heard this morning, that platforms will play a larger role, and this falls into this category. I believe, I share that belief, but I also think that product as a service models will be more common, and another development, especially for smaller shipping companies, is outsourcing of individual functions of ship management, sort of pooling, for example, maintenance within one external service provider, which provides this as a service towards the shipping companies. And that said, now I want to share or let's have a look at value creation in the industry and how this is impacted by the digital transformation. Here, now I have to always look. Yep, that looks wrong as well. I'm sorry about that. From a scientific perspective, it has proven helpful to distinguish between two perspectives, how data and analytics can create economic value. The first one, and look better, my version, is an internal perspective. Here, value is created by increasing efficiency and optimizing the use of resources. And that reduces cost and leads to additional producers' surplus. But the second perspective is an external perspective with a focus on the customer, where new additional value comes from increased customer benefit, which then also, by a suitable revenue model, can increase the producer's surplus and affect a higher price for these products. And here, within this external perspective, there is one, very central driver for success, and that's knowing your customer. And surprisingly common is what sort of from our discussions with industry partners is that there seems to be a lack of clarity in this regard, which, to me is surprising, but it seems to come up again and again. And this first area of the sort of internal perspective seems to be easier for many companies. And here we see the central drivers for success being transparency and availability of information, so something that Mr. Schwaner also stressed about. And from my perspective, this is only the first step, as it leads to sort of quick and well-founded decision-making, which actually is the central new development or the new addition due to the digital transformation. And I will check the slides, but they are all broken. Overall, I believe that database decision making is the central new development within this overall digital transformation, as it sort of allows to mitigate current limitations or current inefficiency in decision making, which we see, well, in this current decision making logic, which is centered on the human and some human limitations that influence decision making. And here, the digital transformation has the potential to avoid these, well, negative influences in finding optimal decisions. And decisions in this context is also something that Mark stressed. He called it optimization. I think that optimization is sort of the first step, and afterwards the decision making sort of builds on optimized sort of decision or input values. We found, and well, I wanted to make reference to our study with this figure. We found in the study we did in the maritime equipment and systems industry that companies have widely identified this decision making as a major chance for the coming years. When asked, for example, for the main drivers behind digitalization projects, both improved transparency and faster decisions were among the top 3 answers. And also when asked sort of about the importance of big data analytics in the future, here a wide variety, sort of 70% of the experts we interviewed said that this would have a very high impact in the midterm future. On the other hand, sort of when it comes to resources and capabilities necessary to actually make use of digital transformation and better decision making, the companies we see that there is still some room to go, and I wanted to share 2 results from our study with you with these figures. The first is that's the same slide we had on the same figure we had on the slide before, where we asked how important big data analytics would be, and only for those companies who answered very important, we further asked them whether they had sufficient capabilities in-house to actually conduct these big data analytics and advanced analytics, and we saw only 1 out of 10 companies actually said that they felt they were sufficiently set up in this area. The second part where we think companies will need to focus is data-driven support systems, and specifically here condition monitoring systems and decision support systems. And for both, also we see that there is still ample room for development. So companies have understood that this is the areas where they need to act, but they're just starting to develop the capabilities required to actually put this into operation. Thank you, and I'm sorry again for the slides. Nothing we can do about that.
Well, actually, there is. Thank you. This reminds me to say something I didn't mention before. All of the slides, all of the presentations, will send an email to you after the event to link to our virtual environment. And in that environment, you'll be able to get all the slides. And perhaps the report that you're referencing, is that a purchasable report or is it a free report?
It is going to be published within the spring, and it belongs to the Fathom. That's sort of our customer. We developed it with them, and I think you can get a copy by getting in contact with us. It's in German though.
Okay, well we can, if you want to, put it as a download on our website for participants.
It's going to be printed only.
Oh, is it? Okay. Well, you have to. I thought it was digital.
This is sort of probably at some point in time it will be available as a PDF, but this is sort of our approach. We have it as a printed copy first, and then after a year we will upload it.
But certainly we can make sure we get the right version of your presentation and put it onto our website. We can download all the presentations. Anyway, so now we're going to go to the third speaker in this session, which is Gerd Svanborn from Marine Marine Solutions Europe. So I'll just hand over straight to you, and then we'll have a panel session afterwards. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. In the next 5 minutes I will very briefly talk about the efficiency gains you can get with more digitalization in asset management. And I think this is a very interesting topic because, as it was already mentioned, the business process optimization normally is very heavily done within the ship manager's side. But these business processes normally stop when it comes to collaboration with the actual asset owners. Accordingly, there is normally also at the end a gap in the data transfer, because as it was already mentioned, of course you would first ask what are the market developments. You would secondly ask how do you need to set up your processes to successfully deliver these demands or cater these demands. The third step would be to design your organization in a way that you can live these processes. And the IT obviously would be the very last step, only to support or enable these processes. And now, when we come to the ship owning, actually there are quite a few questions to be answered. Ship owners want to know what is the cash forecast? Can they afford an investment? Will they have a gap in their cash flow in maybe 4 years if they buy a vessel now? They want to know what is the profit and loss position of their vessels. Are they making profit? Are they making loss? They want to know what is my technical performance. Obviously, a vessel that is more performant, that consumes less with the same speed, has a better value on the charter markets. And a very basic question, when I order a new building, what kind of equipment should be installed on board? Yeah, for maybe the auxiliary engines, for the main engines, of course your experts will directly know which engine will be the best performant, that with the least effort for plant maintenance and with the least breakdown rate. But what if it comes to smaller devices? Let's say the voyage data recording. That one normally no one has in mind which brand, which maker, which model has the best lifetime and the least maintenance costs. But on the other hand, all the data is there because the ship managers are collecting it with the plant maintenance systems. They are tracking what they maintain. They are tracking when there's an unexpected failure. So they have the data, but the owners don't have it. And when we go further, owners would be interested on how do the charter markets develop. Yeah, with all the fleet of vessels they have, they might have a good picture on what the cargo utilization is, in which ports, if vessels are redelivered, on which area, they normally get a good follow-on charter or a good voyage. But this data needs to be used. And the very last step, also owners need to collaborate. Today we have more alternative financing models. You have joint venture partners. You have to report, unfortunately, more to banks. All this is a lot of effort on reporting, which of course can be done more efficiently via digitalization. So let's start with the very first, very briefly. Profit and loss, I think that everyone gets on a quarterly or monthly basis. But obviously there's no need to create any different reports. The figures are there. You can directly interface them, you can directly show them to the owners in real time. And you don't even need to stick to a monthly or quarterly period. This creates more transparency. This will also help to create more trust. And when we come to the technical area, what you see here is a chart of consumption, power, but of course owners also want to know this. And this can very easily be shared. When we come to the equipment, as I said, you have this huge PMS database. You can use it to find out what will be the best equipment for your new buildings. Then when we look at the cash forecasts, of course you have in the forecast your loans and you have your derivatives, any cross-currency swaps. And most probably ship owners will already have treasury systems where they interface the FX rates on a daily basis, where they interface the LIBOR interest rates to learn what their cash forecast should look like. But of course, one key element is what is the income of the vessel, what is the budgeted and estimated OPEX of the vessel for the next years, and what are the corporate expenses. And again, we have, via integration, big potential to improve and facilitate cash reports, because then it's just a touch on the button if you integrate with the source where all this data comes from. Chartering. What you see here now is a small off-hire for one day. You can have this data directly from the ship manager's data available. You can see the remarks, what happened, and you will directly see the impact on your income position for this year, on your profit and loss for this year, and on your cash forecast. Yeah, so that one is possible. It's not rocket science. You just have to integrate. What you see on the other side would be the development of charter rates. Also on a daily basis, you can see, okay, is it improving for my own assets? Is it decreasing? That data should be there. Yeah, and when we talk about collaboration with third-party stakeholders, there is no need to create reports individually for each individual institution you are making business with. For example, what we have developed is just a portal where the external stakeholders can log in with their own user, with their own account, with their own user rights, which of course are very restricted compared to internal users, to view what is going on with their joint venture assets, or if it's a bank, what's going on with the vessels, which unfortunately appear in their balance sheet now. They can do it just via login, and normally everyone is happy to replace any PDF reports and get instead some real data, which is from a real database, as the ship manager will also view it internally. So summarizing, I think the key for more efficiency in asset management is integration. All data should be entered once only by that person, department, which knows first about it and best about it. That will increase efficiency, it will increase quality, because if everything is interlinked, it will be less probable that the data is incorrect. It will increase collaboration, because of course you can exchange remarks, comments, you don't need emails, you can do it directly within the tools you have. And it will also maybe become a business enabler, because institutions will have more trust in what's going on if they see real-time data instead of any copy-paste report provided on a monthly basis. Yeah, that's on my side, I'm very pleased.
Could I invite Mark to come up to the front again, and also our other panellist here is Julia Kuhnbaum, Director from the Fleet Support Centre of Hapag-Lloyd. Just before we go back, can I go back to the poll questions, please, on Slido? So I'll look at some of these points that have come up. I'll just go up to the first one. So one of the questions was on the challenges. What are the biggest challenges? These are some of the words that have popped up from what you've been typing, relating to the loss of technical knowledge in the industry, as we've had to bring in new staff, especially for the smaller companies. Low margins and administration roadblocks, persuade ship managers to invest into digitalisation processes, ever-increasing demands for information, to create an atmosphere of partnership between ship owner, operator and the supplying industries, resistance to change in workflows, that could be part of the ignorance aspect as well. So those are some of the challenges that we're seeing. And when it came to having a difference for digitalisation of the shipping industry, B, extreme gains, the highest vote and significant. So everybody here is agreed that we're going to see a significant or dramatic change. So with this in mind, I'm actually going to start by going to Julia from Hapag-Lloyd perspective here, as you're the new one on the panel here at the front. Please use the microphones. There should be 4 microphones, so don't be scared of them. Julia, from your perspective then, how do you see this digitalisation process? Mark alluded to it being go through a sort of life cycle of digitalisation and then start again. Go through a life cycle and start again. It seems like it's this continual evolution now as part of the future of businesses. Is that how you see it within Hapag-Lloyd, particularly within your operations centre?
To make it short, I would say yes, it's exactly how we see it and what we do. For us, or for me personally, I think it's a process really starting things. You just have to try what is working for you and developing that further. I think the big fear of many companies is that they have to have a complete picture and that they have to find a final, perfect solution. And we figured out that this is a continuous process. What we started with is maybe something we already changed again. We are changing solutions, we are changing the approach towards certain topics, and we are learning on that process. And basically, the key to all of that is bringing the people in who have to basically work with it. So we have in our department monitoring the complete Hapag-Lloyd fleet, so that's also the charter vessels, and that means we are dealing with completely different people every day. They might not know what we have in-house, they might not know our procedures, our ideas, and bringing them on board and explaining them what we want from them is something that enables us to use data or digital solutions in an effective way. If we don't manage to explain what we really want to do, we will not succeed.
One of the questions that has come up from the audience involves should the digitalisation be looking for the problem, or almost the other way round? Should we not embrace some of the digital solutions and say, hey, here's a great idea, I didn't know it could be so useful to me, in the same way society never realised just how useful the smartphone was going to be?
Well, I think it's 2 ways. First of all, if I have a problem, I should try to find a solution, for sure. On the other hand, if there are some solutions in the market where I might not know whether they work or how they could work for me, it's worth trying. It's worth identifying whether there is a benefit for you or not. But if I don't solve a problem or a need or anything behind it, it will not help me. So I need to find something that this makes it valuable for me.
One of the questions, the most popular question that we've had is, external consultants often have difficulties to understand the specifics of its shipping. How do we teach them to talk and think shipping? In other words, how do you get the non-maritime shipping to talk in a language?
We had Lufthansa come in on the shipping side, which is probably the last type of organisation you want to bring into shipping. Aviation is very, very different to shipping. But it's a bit like writing a book. Some of us think we're budding authors out there. I think in everybody there is a book. I know I've tried many times. I just can't seem to start because I think I've written the introduction so many times and I can't get beyond the introduction. And I think it's because we're looking at digitalisation as rocket science. We're focusing too much on digitalisation. What we have to focus on is those other 2 aspects of the digitalisation process that I talked about: innovation and process. If you actually forget digitalisation, you think, how do we do what we do better? And guys and girls, come on, let's think of ideas, what we can do, different business lines is, and then we will digitalise it. We'll make the process more effective, more efficient. That gets you through that writer's block or that digitalisation block. And it took Lufthansa, I think, that have had a lot of experience in this type of situation to come in and say, this is how you do it. You do need outside help. You certainly do. Just to get you on that path. They can't do it for you. No one can. You don't need them to understand your business. You don't need these outside experts to understand your business. They will find that out in the process. Only you can do that. You sit down, you come up with the ideas, you improve the processes, and then you go to them and say, right now, how do we, what are the tools within the digitalization box, within the optimization box to do that? But in itself, it brings in new concepts and ideas. For instance, in aviation, there is no such thing as off-hire. We have a lot of anachronisms in shipping. A vessel is allowed to remain idle for a certain period specified in the charter party without being sued for it. Can you imagine British Airways or Lufthansa saying, sorry guys, the plane's on the tarmac and it's going to be on the tarmac for the next 2 weeks, go and find alternatives. You get sued for that because you have an uptime requirement. Shipping is also going to have go through these changes where off-hire becomes a thing of the past. You have 99.9% uptime and you're expected to have that. And that's why bringing in outside agents, people who don't have the specific knowledge, is sometimes a good thing, because that's the way we're going. We will be a service provider within a much bigger transportation chain, within a much bigger logistics chain, and we will have to improve our performance and improve the way we do things as we're going to.
So what would you say very quickly then was the benefits of Lufthansa in your
just getting us off that right, getting us through that writer's block, and actually sitting down. And I remember the first meeting we had was a pretty hostile one, where one of the shareholders said, "Oh, this is complete rubbish. I just want my platform to do X." And we just said, look, you're missing the point. Actually, we need to reformulate this committee, because with the best will in the world, there are some people who just don't understand or can't understand what it requires to get us down there. So it gets you through that writer's block and really identifies what the other blocks are going to be in that process. So it's very, very refreshing.
How do you, actually, the question here, I'm actually going to go to Luke's for, in terms of agreements and sort of rules of engagement, when it comes to data ownership. Is it true that this data ownership is remaining a big obstacle? When ship owners started to realise that they had all this data that they could take off the ship, there was a sort of like, oh, we own it, but they didn't quite know how to use it. I got the impression there was sort of like this ownership battle, like kids in a toy shop wanting to own the toys, but not necessarily knowing how to use them. Is that still a fact, or have we started to see a lot more trust in sharing the data and then getting some positive feedback from that data?
I think this is a question for the lawyers, actually.
Mark then.
No, I mean, that's something that the lawyers, or sort of the question how you phrase your contracts. But I don't think it's a problem or a technical problem. Of course, you want to keep rights of certain data, and this might not be covered in current contracts, but I think contracts will change and will adapt to that. So I think this is not a barrier in the medium term future. It's sort of something where companies need to find a common ground and some best practices, and after that has been established, I think it's going to be solved and not sort of an issue for a long time.
But Gertz, from the sort of startup perspective, quite often startups, they need, part of their business is getting data from ship owners, ship managers, and being able to hand something back that gives added value to that potential client. So how do you go about turning around to your clients, to any ship owner or ship operator, and saying, give us your data and we'll give you value?
Actually our approach is just the contrary. We don't take the data of the customers. We leave it on the customer's decision where to store it, in which server, on the cloud. That we leave up to the customers, because indeed, as you say, in shipping, the reluctancy to upload data somewhere where everyone could maybe make it more productive for everyone is not that far yet. There are some solutions which started going that way, especially in chartering. Of course, the potential is huge. You can, when you have many vessels and see how long it takes from one port to another, you have, of course, a way better model on calculating based on past figures how long it will take. You don't need any buffers. Buffers will always cover inefficiencies in the process. But indeed, in shipping, companies are very, try to avoid to give away their data. And at the end, our approach is that we cater the customer's desire at that point. But of course, we mention that this has some downside, because we won't have that big database that will allow more accurate calculations of voyage time, for example.
I think data has to be protected, whether it's personal data or whether it's data about your vessels or your organisation. Transparency doesn't mean that everybody can look at it. Why should they? I disagree that all data should be available. If data is misused or slanted or skewed, you can very quickly render an organisation unprofitable or a vessel unemployable simply because certain data taken at a particular snapshot is out there. Once the data is there, it's very difficult to call it back. So there has to be, and this is the whole essence of GDPR on personal data, but it's something similar also on your company's data. It has to be protected. And transparency, yes, to your clients in a protected environment, but not for everybody. No, why should you?
Julia, Hapag-Lloyd, what do you take? What's your approach with that? Because you're a large company ingrained into a lot of clients' logistics chains, effectively.
Yeah, well, I cannot comment actually on the commercial side, so what we do with our clients, because that's not my part of the business. Obviously, we work on solutions there as well. But what I can say is that we see a lot of interest to share data, because at the moment we capture 2 or 3 times data from the vessels, which are everywhere the same. So we don't have a problem in finding partners that want to share data with us. At the moment, the bigger problem is everyone has his own systems installed, and many of the solutions which are there in the market do not allow easy share of data, because the software providers are not really interested in having a data exchange between different systems. And that's actually where we are working on together with ship managers, with other partners in that value chain, to understand how we can overcome this. And also check with younger companies that are not that reluctant to open their software to other solutions, because let's face it, there is different solutions in the market and we have to deal with it. There will be not one common reporting platform, there will be not one system for sensors, there will be not one, as we saw before, exchange with the ports. At the moment it's highly unstandardized information which we see in the market, and we need to find solutions that allow us to reduce workload by exchanging information that is commonly anyhow available in every company.
Are you finding that the companies that you're talking to are getting more engaged? Are they more...
Definitely. I mean, we continuously exchanging information on the performance of the vessel. As soon as we see problems with the ships, we go back to the ship manager, discuss the matters. What can it be? Is it the specific trade the vessels are in? Is it the cargo? Is it weather, hull, damages whatsoever? And it's a very open discussions, because otherwise we cannot make it. It's in the benefit of both to understand if a vessel is not performing, what is the reason for it.
And how do you ensure that any data is accurate? We alluded a minute ago to, you get some data and you don't know how good it is until you get more data. And then you get an idea that it's better. And then you go, oh, actually, you know, the analytics are actually making things better. The more data you get, the better the analysis of the data will be. So at some point you must say, okay, now the data is good enough to use.
Yeah, I think there's always a discussions about how good is the data. The data will never be perfect. And to be honest, if I have 220 vessels I can compare with, and the first data set has showed me that the vessel is not performing, I will just try to investigate further. So I do not need 100% perfect data, and I don't need much data to understand whether something is working or not. If the vessel is ordering, for example, much more bunker than every other vessel in that service, obviously something is different. So then I can investigate, and I can go back to the ship manager who might have much more data than I have to investigate what is the reason. I don't need that much data to start with. For the details, of course, we have to identify them in discussions with the vessel, in discussion with ship managers, and whatever you have at hand to identify what is the reason. But for the first estimate, you don't need it.
When it comes to the ship's crews, and this is perhaps where Mark or Julia could answer the question, what's the relationship between the ship crew and training and awareness here? How is that evolving? How are you... There was the comment that the more engaged the crew are, the more digitalised they are, the more satisfied they are. How are we looking at the engagement of the crew, the training of the crew, the education of the crew, the awareness of the crew?
It's a massive topic, and our knee-jerk reaction is if you provide the crew with 24/7 internet access, then that is going to make for a happier, better informed, better focused crew. But actually, when a crew member is on board a vessel and is communicating with home and there are problems going on at home, whatever they might be, you question whether you're doing him or her a favour by allowing that continual access that didn't previously exist and would be looked after in other ways. Obviously on the training side, there's huge potential for crew training through intelligent data transfer, and something that we're looking at all the time. In fact, while the crews are on their leave periods, a lot of training now can take place through your smartphone. So when they're sitting in the coffee bars, chatting to their friends or bored or whatever, they can. There are apps now that will download training, so they can quickly do multiple choice questions and complete certain elements of their training, elemental elements of their training. You can use data in so many inventive ways, both on board and ashore. And of course, the whole digitalization process allows for a much better management of crew, both from their professional career development to their education to their pastoral care. It allows us to look after their families much more whilst they're away, just simply because of the access of all of this information. So for crew, it's a huge issue, but query whether allowing crew 24/7 internet access to that sort of data is the right thing. I'm not sure.
You certainly on the when it comes to which parts of the maritime and shipping industries will or need to be transformed by digital solutions next. Ship management seems to have come out top there. Julia, last word. Last word from you then on this panel. How important do you see the digitalisation from a ship operation and crew perspective?
I'm not sure if digitalization is the right word, but using data and making it meaningful is something that is very crucial, and it needs to be transparent and easy to understand. I think that is the core, I would like to say, and it needs to be transparent to everyone who is involved. So also the ship, the people on board needs to know what we do with data, what we analyze it, to also give them the chance to improve their operations. And the same ashore, you need to train people on how to read it. It needs to be that easy to understand that everyone really knows what to focus on and what is a current critical topic.
But can I just add, what we do need as well is a protection for general data, as opposed to we have GDPR on personal data. The next step will be, yes, by all means, we as a ship manager will share our data with our clients, but we need to ensure that data is protected and not dissipated out into the market, because then you risk that being corrupted and skewed and actually backfiring. So, protection of data and monetization of data. The big thing next year will be monetization of data. There's so much money around the data that is produced from the vessels, around the data that is produced from the crew. That's why everybody wants this data. Let's face it, it needs to be properly protected.
Good. Thank you very much, Julia, Gert, Lutz and Mark for that panel sessions. Thank you very much. We're going to coffee break now. Could I ask you